I'm joined by Larry Tompkins now to talk about his autobiography that recently came out, Believe, which was written in conjunction with Dennis Hurley, a sports journalist based down in Cork. It's a really good read, Larry. Really enjoyed it. Geez, you've had a rich tapestry over the years. I mean, obviously growing up in Kildare, going to school in Wicklow, playing for Kildare, off to New York, and ultimately probably making your name more so than anywhere down in Cork as well, and with Castlehaven. Was it a journey to go through the book? What was it like?
Yeah, look, it was. It's funny because when I was asked to write a book, even when I was finished playing, I reneged on writing it, and the reason being, like, I suppose I've looked at books and kind of read a few books and sports books and GA books, and like there can be a lot, kind of, no disrespect to any guys that have done them, but I just think it's a kind of replica of matches, and I didn't want my book to be kind of like that. And I suppose initially I said no, and then when I was manager at Cork, I was asked again, and I said no. So I suppose this time around, Liam Hayes asked me, and Liam is naturally who I played against, and he was playing with Meath, and he asked me would I consider writing a book, and I suppose he threw the thing up to me and said, "Look," he said, "you've had the distinction of been in so many places and played with so many counties and so many clubs. If you're lucky enough in GA, you play with a club and a county. For me, it was a case. My journey was a bit different. Like I played with 4 different counties and 2 clubs. So I wanted the book to be kind of not kind of on matches. I just wanted it to be a journey and a story, and that's kind of really how it's kind of gathered up. And I just hope people enjoy it, because there has been the highest, there has been the lowest, there has been the emotions of even my daughter being, going through so many operations when she was young, and my journey to Man United. And look, I think there's a good mixture there, and I just think, look, I was delighted to write it. Dennis Hurley done a great job on it. My wife contributed enormously as well, like in relation to the book, to try and get to the inside of the stories with me. It took a long time. It took the guts of maybe 16 months to do it. It was hard work, but look, I really enjoyed it, and I hope it's a good read there from people.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, obviously the rivalry with Meath jumps off the page. Going over to get your physio done, and Paul McGrath involved, Bryan Robson, all these massive legends. Like, it was really enjoyable to read. The thing I'm curious about is, are there times where it's all like there are certain periods you come to and opening up to talk about a certain thing is quite painful or particularly hilarious? Is there anything that sticks out?
I suppose the hilarious things was, I suppose, when I was asked to go to Man United for treatment in 1988.
This was between the drawn All Ireland and the replay when you'd
Yeah,
injured your hamstring,
yeah.
yeah.
I tore my hamstring in the first game, and I played on. And look, the replay wasn't for 3 weeks. It just maybe gave me that little extra week that I really needed. So, in fairness to Cork County Board, they sent me to Man United, which is a crazy move, really. I was just told the next day when I got on a flight to Manchester and be in Old Trafford. So, look, I got picked up with a guy called Paddy Curran, who played with Man United a long, long time, and he played in the 60s, and went to the Cliff training ground initially, and met Alex Ferguson on arrival. I had a good chat with him, and he told me the layout of Man United, what was there for me. And I stayed in a place called the Copthorne Hotel, which is right beside Old Trafford, and every morning I had Bryan Robson, who was captain of Man United, and I had Paul McGrath, who picked me up every morning. And Bryan was the passenger seat, had the passenger seat, because he was put off the road for drink driving, and Paul, like, I suppose Paul was in a crazy situation that time, because he was just, again, like, I suppose he was, he was frequently in the boozer every night, like, and a lot of Man United lads were going drinking every night. So I ended up, like, going with the United guys, and me drinking my Ballyclone or 7-Up, preparing for another replay, and these guys, professional players, and they drinking loads of pints, and they asked me how much money was I earning. So it was kind of a bit of an unusual story that I didn't think I was going to encounter. But look, that's why I had so much great admiration, like, for GA players when they come out of there, because you just look at the concept of the whole thing, and you just look at the GA player that thrive so much on trying to love his jersey for his club, love the jersey that if he gets for the county team, and then has to work then in between to try and have a livelihood. So massive time for GA players.
And did they ever try and talk you into having a massive booze with them? Did they succeed at all, or were you so fixated on the All Ireland final that you weren't going to be dragged into it?
No, Liam Hayes enjoyed this. I hated Meath so much that I just needed to be right. You know what I mean? But no respect to the Meath lads. I had a great time for them, but we just needed to beat them. But no, it's funny. Like, I just was so committed to try and just get right for that game, and but here I was just seeing a completely different kind of an angle what I thought I'd see at Man United, and naturally it took Ferguson quite a while to kind of weed that kind of a situation out of United. And it's amazing because Ferguson was there a couple of years, and he was at the brink of maybe a year or two, maybe down the line, he could have been gone. So tricky period for Man United, but I think that, as we all know, then Sir Alex became the greatest manager nearly of all time. So amazing the turnaround.
And did you support Man United at the time?
No, I was a young fellow growing up. I supported Leeds United.
So you had no time for them.
So it wasn't. Look, it wasn't. I wouldn't be bored death on soccer, but naturally I became very friendly with a lot of guys that had played professional soccer, including Roy Keane when I came to Cork, and even Ali McCoist, who I met in Lillyshaw later, a few years later when I was recovering from a knee operation that I was sent to Lillyshaw, and I met, again, like Rory Underwood, Jonathan Webb, Robbie, Ali McCoist, Alan Shearer. I suppose I had the distinction of training with Alan Shearer in Lillyshaw, and I really enjoyed that because he was competitive, but to try and get the better of him was good. So it just pitted you again guys like that were household names, and it just let me know that look, I was good as any of them, and fitness wise, and I felt very comfortable with them,
Yeah. Just seeing as you mentioned Bryan Robson and you had a bit of experience of him, I just thought of it there that there was a famous excerpt from Lee Sharp's autobiography. It was a former winger, for people who don't remember him, for Man United, and he was talking about Bryan Robson. So I'll just read it out to you and see if it gives any flavour of what you experienced when you were at United. And Lee Sharp goes, Robbo was the king of everything at United at that time. There were occasions when he'd start drinking in an afternoon or evening, then drink all night. I seen him carry on through, have a champagne breakfast, then go on into the next day drinking, even up to the evening, and have another night out on the piss. Throughout, he'd mostly just chats away, doesn't look like it's touched him. He might get a bit glassy-eyed, slur his words, but that was usually all. Then the next day, Bryan Robson would be in training in his kit, right in the front, group training around Littleton Road, sprinting as fast as anyone, usually the best player on the pitch in a five-a-side, covering every blade of grass. Captain Marvel. Does that tell you with what you saw?
Yeah, exactly. Like that time you had a lot of guys that were fond of the drink. You had Lee Sharp and you had Clayton Blackmore, and of course the wonder boy at that time in Man United, and he was getting treatment right beside me, was Norman Whiteside. Norman was the young kid on the block, and he was the real star coming along in Man United. But I don't think Norman wanted to do the kind of the hard slog or the hard training. But Bryan was a different animal. Like, Bryan was able to kind of conjure up. He had ferocious kind of strength that didn't matter. Like, if he got no sleep during the night, he was still able to do what you said there, and you could see that with him in training sessions like that. He had a purpose when he was out on the training field. He didn't want to be beaten. So, yeah, he was a wonderful player. And naturally these guys were they were big names. But look, that's why I suppose my book is called Believe. I think that in every person, if you want to make it or do anything, there's nothing impossible, and you need to believe. And look, you can't have an inferior complex about anybody. And certainly, that was kind of my attitude going over there. And even though I was meeting these guys and training with them, I always believe in my ability, and that's the way I went.
And Paul McGrath, I mean, he around the time that he was collecting you, it was probably just a couple of months after Euro '88, which was a massive success for Ireland at the time, having beaten England and all that kind of stuff. Was that ever brought up in conversation, or had you paid much attention to the Euros?
I did. Look, sure, Paul was a superstar, you know what I mean? And again, I suppose he was I suppose he was the type of guy like that again, like probably Bryan, like he was well able to consume a good bit of drink and then still be able to perform and be able to do it on the training field. Some guys could be just collapsed inside in the room and wouldn't be able to get out of bed. So, but these guys were, they were tough and hard, and you could see that in their makeup, like. But McGrath always kind of referred to the GAA like as he thought it was a kind of an animal sport, like where guys really went at each other, and he said he'd love to have a go at it, and I was just saying to him, Jesus, I said you'd make a great centre back, you know what I mean? You'll be able to stop everything coming through the middle, but he couldn't believe, like I suppose, like that. Like myself and other GA players, and Kevin Morden, he used to call Kevin Morden Kevin Moran, like. Kevin Moran or Kevin Morden had just kind of transferred to Spain at that time. He had just gone before I kind of went over there, and that was a pity because I would have known Kevin Morden since my early days in Kildare when he was playing with Dublin, and I was kind of coming onto the scene with Kildare. So I just missed out on meeting him in Old Trafford. He had just, as I said, transferred to the Spanish club. So Morden was just he would have loved to have a go at the GA and have a cut off it. So. We had great old chats, and he loved the Irish banter, and he loved the crack, and he loved talking about it.
Absolutely. And like at the time you were there, obviously to get your hamstring treated, and Jim McGregor had said to you, if you're willing to suffer, we have a chance. And obviously you went on to play. Did you get a chance to play any soccer whatsoever, or was it very much you're sticking to your rehab and then trying to just get whatever fitness test McGregor had for you before you left?
Look, we actually a lot of it was down to the physio work and trying to get me right, but spent a good few times like in Old Trafford as well, like on the training pitch and knocking around the ball to some of these soccer guys, and it was just really as a kind of a warm-up situation, really. I was trying, probably after 10 days when I was over there, I was kind of being able to get out on the field and do a little bit, but what they really do at the end of the day, I had the luck of going to a first game match with Man United, and a reserve game, and was in the dugout. Not that I was going to come on or anything like that, but it was just they facilitated me, and they allowed me to sit in the dugout for a reserve game. So that was nice in Old Trafford, So I think that at the end of the day, it was just being able to just get the injury sorted, and then what Jim McGregor done then was really he put you through a fitness test then. When a day, or it was actually the day I went home, he put you through a rigorous fitness test in relation to your hamstring, and if you were able to come through that with about 50 minutes, I done that in Old Trafford, and if you were able to come through that, then he would sign the dotted line that you were fit enough to play. But by God, it was a hard 50 minutes,
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you'd injured it the first day and came out midfield when you were about to come off. And then you were told by the manager, go out midfield, so you swapped with Teddy McCarthy, got through the game, had a free at the end, knocked it over the bar, thought you had won it, and ultimately there was still time for me to get a free knocked over by Brian Stafford. And Dr. Conn was crying after the game, like he thought you were done, and as he revealed afterwards, he was crying after that first game because he more or less thought that was our chance gone, and ultimately Meath did win it.
Yeah, look, it was one of those games where we felt like that we were way the better team, and I took that last free, and Tommy Sugu refereed it, and as he said, it was the final kick of the game. But unbelievably, Dave Barry jumped up on my shoulders after the ball went over, and we thought the game was over. Ball was kicked out by McQuillan. Shea Fahy caught it cleanly. He went to punch the ball to Tony Nation, and the ball went out over the sideline. For that was nearly gone 2 minutes over the time, and Martin O'Connell then kicked it. At that time he had to kick the balls off the ground from the sideline, and he just kicked a magnificent kick into the square, and it was just a melee of every load of bodies going for it. And Dave Beggy, as he said afterwards himself, after a few points, that he just threw himself on the ground, and unfortunately Tommy Sulu blew the whistle and gave a 14 yards free. It was incredible inside the dressing room, and I remember Dr. Conn Murphy crying, and Dr. Conn, you see, had been with so many teams and had been in so many dressing rooms within hurling and football, and he got the sense like that, we had thrown the kitchen sink, and we should have been 10 points a better team in Meath in the day, and he just felt maybe that our chance was lost, and I certainly didn't think I'd be able to play the replay, but going to Manchester United was the reason why I played the replay. But unfortunately, in the replay, we lost by a point, and Dr. Conn was right.
And having lost 2 finals to Meath, do you think it was a huge benefit to you that the next final that you ultimately did win and you won 2 in a row, that was against Mayo before ultimately, finally being able to beat Meath again the following year in the final? So the fact that it was against Mayo, that helped.
Yeah, look, I do think we needed to win something, and that year in '89, even going back to the league, we won the league title. We beat Dublin in the league decider here. Then we had to travel to New York to play in a 2-game decider over there to win the league outright. But I think just winning the league, there was a good stepping block to kind of move forward then through '89. Naturally, Meath were our biggest enemies, and there was a lot of friction and there was a lot of hatred, a lot of things that happened over the previous few years. There was our blood was boiling in relation to try to meet them again and beat them. But unfortunately for us, we kept going, but Meath got beaten in the Leinster final that year by Dublin, so we ended up playing Dublin in the semi-final, getting through them. And the All-Ireland final was a game. It was a very good game, a very good footballing game, but we were nervous in that game because we felt like that we were raging hot favourites. We needed to win it, but there was a stage there in that game where that game could have been won for Mayo. And Anthony Finnerty always says, "You come on a sub, you got a great goal, and then probably missed an easier one." But he's always remembered. Anthony would say, people come up to him and say today like that they never talk about the goal he scored, but the one he missed. But it was a defining moment of the game because if that ball had to go in, we were in a difficult situation to try and come back from it. But we did finish strong that day in the last 10 minutes, and we pulled away and we won by 3 or 4 points in the end. But it was a brilliant year. It instilled a lot of confidence in the team that we really knew that we were well capable of really being there for quite a while again. And but there was just unfinished business really, and Meath was the unfinished business.
I'm sure doing the book jogged your memory and brought things back to you. What's your earliest memory of ever playing football, or even of being a young lad in general?
I suppose I was maybe 4 or 5 years of age, just out in the farmer's field, as I said from my book there. I had 4 other brothers, and naturally they were out in the field as well. And then we had neighbours, like we had a few sergeants and Fitzpatricks and Duns. Like just the neighbourhood just came together, and there could be 17 or 18 lads out in the field. And like I was one of the youngest, and you were given no mercy. Like, and I suppose you don't realise at the time like that it was the best education I ever got. And we used to go out after listening to you. You're definitely too young to remember the old brown radio and the old big box of a radio like that. We used to go up to a neighbour's house and we'd listen to the matches on the radio. Michael O'Hare, a magnificent commentator, and he'd be commentating on the matches. And so we'd run out onto the field, into the farmer's field, and we just wanted to be one of those guys on the radio. And everybody was called a different name, a name that was we after hearing on the radio. So, look, it was just brilliant times, and brilliant times to probably develop your game that you didn't even think that you were doing at the time. So that's really how I kind of came going or got at it. We only had a football. That was it. Actually, that's all we could afford, and there was only a football out there, and lads went out and enjoyed it, and we'd stay out there for 5 or 6 hours until it'd be dark. And because there was no competitions that time, Shane. There was no. My first competition was an under 11 competition, and that was only a few games, and that was it. There was no real kind of collective training or anything like that at that time. You just met and you played a few games. My next time then to play was under 14, so it is very scarce compared to what young lads nowadays have.
Yeah, because like my mother was born not to a similar era as well, and she used to say to me, like, when I was young, I had only one toy and it was a stick, when she's trying to explain how little that they had back then. And like, you did paint the picture of a different world. I mean, if I remember correctly, it was like you were trying to explain to your own kids maybe that you didn't even have running water back then, and within the house or whatever. Like, can you paint a picture of how different it was back then?
Like, it was, which we didn't know any better. Like, we had no TVs, no running water, no electricity. like it was just neighbour. The houses were open. Nobody had, we didn't have transport. Very few people around the road had transport. Maybe a couple of people, and the doors were open to everybody. People walked from one neighbour house to another, and they'd put on the kettle. It was like if you were just, part of the family. It was completely different. Like, and even going to school, like it's like we used to be crying going into school, like, because it was so tough and hard, like, and we used to walk nearly to go to nearly 2 miles to school, and to this national school. And I remember one instance, like, where my brother was kept in one day, and when the bell went, he made a run for the door to get out, and climbed down the telegraph pole, back down onto the road, ran up the road, and we had the teacher then got into a car and drove up and dragged him back into the car, and kept him in for another 2 hours. And that, I think it was from doing, when we think about it, I think it was that we used to do knitting that time. So we used
Knitting.
to, anytime now we'd see, people be saying, anytime we'd see someone in Crow Park now, and they'd be doing it, and we'd be saying, Jesus, that was one of the teachers from back in the day, they're still doing the knitting. But it was, that's the way it was. Like, it was just so tough, like, and the comprehension of just even saying to my kids, no, that's the way it happened. They think that kind of I'm just making up the stories, But like, as people were in that era, like, there were tough times and hard times, but at the same time, people didn't want much. My father and mother, they worked hard, and they were fantastic people. The neighbours were fantastic. It was a massive community spirit there always. And it was just massive development for all of us. There were 7 in our family, and each and every one of us are very, very close, and every one of us has done very well.
And I'm curious to ask you about identity, because having been from one place and joining a different club, this is something that goes on that I know about myself. Like, you're still proud of where you've come from, never mind where you go. So for you, having grown up and played with Eadstown, Kildare, you were over in New York, obviously playing over there for a spell. Cork obviously becomes home for you, in Castlehaven, and you've retained your Kildare accent to a fair bit, as far as I can hear. I would say it's a stronger Kildare accent than it is a Cork one. Like, I presume you're still very proud of where you came from, and is there that sort of a dual identity thing that goes on within you?
So look, everywhere I went, like, I kind of, I think you've got to go into a place and you have to have massive respect for everywhere. Like, and I was no different. Like, growing up in Kildare, it was my life. Like, it was, spending my secondary school days in Blessing and Wicklow were massive days. Like, I played for Wicklow Station school team, and every one of those places I left with, massive respect for everybody that helped me along the way. And there's no saying, like, you walk into one place and you walk out of it, your life changes. But I think that the biggest thing a person has, like, that, you leave with an admiration of the help that those people gave you, like. And the admiration, like, the Kildare people have for myself and Shay Fahy, who was the other guy that played with Cork as well, was, I suppose, came to the table really when we were in All Ireland finals, and the support, the letters, the cards. I remember 1987, our first All Ireland final. At that time, there was no infrastructure or going past the Kildare town or anything like that. You had to go through every village, and there was a massive big banner up in Kildare town, "Welcome home, Shay and Larry." So look, massive time for every team that has helped me along the way, and massive admiration for all the unsung heroes, I would call them, the people at the grassroots level that really get no mention and no kind of mention when the big days are there, really. That I have so many of those people, like, that I could thank, like, that have helped me along the way. And I just say to my kids now growing up, no matter what you do in life, you're at training, you always make sure and you say thanks and appreciation, because that goes an awful long way.
And I was looking up, the length of your Kildare career online. Now, I hope these stats are trustworthy, but it says you played from 1979 to 1985, 8 appearances, scored 233. Does any particular moment playing for Kildare stick out?
Sure. Look, every game was, every time you put on the Kildare jersey was a massive honour. Initially at minor level, like, we didn't win an Leinster title. Like, again, Meath beat us in a Leinster final, like, that we came close to winning. We did win a Leinster under 21 title, which was great, which was fantastic. And I suppose our closest time that we got to a Leinster final with Kildare at senior level was 1983 when Dublin beat us in Navan by 2 points. You know, I was carried off in a stretcher with a Dunley's shoulder with a tackle with Tommy Drum, and that was the day that Brian Mullins made his return back after a massive car accident. And Dublin went, believe it or not, then Dublin went down and won the All-Ireland. So we actually came close to knocking them out in the All-Ireland or in the Leinster semi-final. So look, there was massive days with Kildare and great moments and great times, great friends, massive followers and supporters that have followed me even through my Cork days. And similarly, no matter where you go in life like that, as I said, the respect you'd have for people that's kind of on the teams, running the teams and being involved in the teams, you know, they're magic moments really, and been so lucky to have encountered a lot.
And I often wonder, you know, do you think of sliding doors moments? You know, if there was more, I don't know, if there were more jobs in Ireland at the time, you mightn't have gone to New York and you mightn't have played out there. And then the issue which ultimately made you leave Kildare was that the county board had promised that you'd have a ticket going back to New York and ultimately didn't deliver upon that. And then the fact that you had pushed Dublin so close that year you're talking about, they go on to win the All-Ireland. If things had been different, could you have ended up being really successful with Kildare? Has that sort of stuff ever crossed your mind?
I think, first of all, I think that what's disappointing in Kildare at the time I was there was that I always say it, and I said it publicly in my book, like, and no qualms about it. The county board were an absolute disaster, really. It was just all over the place. Like, I had a brother who was a serious player, and he had no interest in playing with Kildare because of the manner and the way they ran things. I was completely different. I didn't care if I had to walk 14 miles to training and there was only 12 of us training. And sometimes, believe it or not, when an inter-county team, Kildare had 12 or 13 players training. That was it. It's hard to believe, like, but that happened. But, you know, I was one of that 12 or 13. There was loads of other great players in Kildare, like, that just didn't commit to the level that you want them. But we would have had a real good team, a team that would have been very, very competitive. I've no doubt in my mind the thing had been ran well at the top level. But unfortunately, like, that didn't happen. That was a massive disappointment for me. Looking back at it now, it was massive. It's even worse to think of maybe that we could have had so much success if we had a proper setup. And that's disappointing. And but look, you're dead right. If there was work there in Kildare, and I was working, I was just after serving my time, was completing my time as a carpenter. There was absolutely no work in Ireland at that time. We had 5 brothers at home, and every one of us were tradesmen. There was only one of us working. So that would give you a kind of a hindsight into the way things were in the 80s. It wasn't that people had big borrowings or anything like that, but people just didn't have work. And my life just changed. Just went in on a bus one day to Dublin, met a guy called McGrath on the street, a guy that had played with Offaly, and just from there on he had said he was over in America, and the following week I got a call from my great friend in Donegal, New York, Tony Gallagher, and that really changed my life completely.
And playing at Gaelic Park, do you remember your first game out there?
I do. It was against Sligo. I went out for a weekend to see what it was like. I stayed about a week, and I came back again. But I couldn't get over the amount of people who were at the games. There must have been 7,000 or 8,000 people at the games. At the games that Sunday. I remember the referee didn't blow the whistle too many times. It was tough. It was hard. But look, I came out of the game. Sligo were one of the top teams over there at the time. Donegal equally, and I came out of the game and I had played well, and I think Donegal were very anxious to kind of bring me on board and asked me kind of would I be interested in kind of coming out here and staying out here for a while and see how it went. So that's how it really started.
And did you find when you were out there just living in New York, and obviously you had the home from home with these players playing with Donegal, New York, did you find it reinforced your Irishness a little bit being away where it obviously wasn't Ireland anymore?
Look, I always say like that, when the Wolf Tones or someone like that came over to play in New York, we were all there because we felt like we were at home again, and they were singing all the Irish songs, and things like that, like matches, of course. Like we used to go down to the local pub. I lived in the Bronx, and we used to go down to the Celtic House, was the pub down the road from us where we lived, and we used to go down there every Monday, Shane. And that time, the videotapes used to come in on the Monday from the flights of the matches that had been played in Ireland, and there was a big gathering of people then on the Monday night inside the local pub in the Bronx, and we'd watch all the rerun of the games the weekend in Ireland. And look, that's what made you. We never forgot where we were from, or the link was incredible. And I suppose the link was incredible in New York because of Gaelic Park as well. Of a Sunday, as I said, at that time you had 8,000 or 10,000 people to just come along on a Sunday, and you didn't have to play hurling or football, but it was the gathering of all the Irish, and it was the gathering of maybe people just out there maybe wanting to get a start in work or meet somebody maybe that accommodation wise they had just been out. So it was just a massive link for the whole of the Irish people. And I think whatever it is about America, I think it's to really unite the Irish. Whatever it is about them, they love the Irish. They love when the Americans hear that you're from Ireland, they just congregate around you. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, I think we just have the crack, and they just kind of believe everything we say, But no, look, when I arrived there, I'll be honest with you, I just felt this was my place. I just felt I wouldn't come out of it for a long time,
And obviously a couple of the Castlehaven lads planted the seed to join them eventually. When you got to Castlehaven the first time and went out in the training field, did it feel that way also, that this is the place for me?
Yeah, look, I would be very passionate and very committed to playing GAA. And I suppose when you're over in New York and you're talking to these lads, it's you begin to kind of, the voice of somebody, it can be infectious or it can be false. And these guys from Castlehaven that were playing in New York and playing with Donegal, they were just absolute crazy. Like, they were just fanatics, and like, they were just felt like that Castlehaven was the best team in the world. I hadn't a clue where Castlehaven was. It was just crazy stuff they were kind of talking to me about, and I suppose it grew on me. They chipped away, and initially it wasn't a case that they were thinking that I was ever going to come back and play with Castlehaven. They were just telling me where they were from and what it would mean to them if they won a county, and the old people down there that they would die happy to see the Castlehaven winning the county, and that was their dream. And they said maybe someday they'd go back and see would be able to help and go back and play with them. So I suppose that was always the conversation when I met them. And playing after games in Gaelic Park, we'd stand in the old tarmac and we'd be listening to the music on the top of the roof. And in the old Gaelic Park, we used to have a band. And the most topic of conversation was Castlehaven. That's all they were talking about. So I suppose it grew on me. They chipped away at me, and eventually then, I decided to go back with them then.
And I asked Liam Hayes, who of course was one of your great rivals on that Meath team, about you, and he says, I don't think people in the modern generation will ever know how good he was, but his book will tell you. He spent time in England recuperating from different injuries, and himself and Alan Shearer spent 2 weeks in rehab together. Larry was off the charts. He whacked Alan Shearer, a professional footballer, one of the real physical, muscular forwards of the game, and it's on record, he destroyed Shearer in nearly every single discipline, an amateur Gaelic footballer. Can you explain that particular time? You mentioned it already in Lillishon.
Well, I think when you play against me so many times, I think you're hardened and toughened up to it. But and do you know what? It was a great education for me. Well, it was New York, because I arrived over there as a young fella. I wasn't even 21. And, I worked in a tough place in New York. I worked in Harlem. I spent 10 months there, getting off a subway at 5 o'clock in the morning, carrying a bag of tools on your back, walking up the main street of Harlem. It's a very daunting place. And look, the challenges that were in front of you, toughen you up, to harden you up, they give a different dimension to you. And I suppose again, in relation to the book, you believe in yourself, don't you? And you don't kind of. These guys are stars, and I don't want to take away from Alan Shearer or Bryan Robson or any of these guys. They were brilliant players, and brilliant sports people. But equally, I think that even though I was playing at an amateur level, it doesn't make me any inferior to them, even though I was only an amateur. And that's kind of the the message I'd like to kind of get across to people like that, you must believe in yourself, like as an athlete and as a player. And when I met these guys, the challenges were there, and I look forward to these challenges. I went on numerous cycle runs with Alan Shearer over in Lillishall, because they put you on a bike out in the country in the heart of the Midlands in England, and you just go cycling for 40 miles, and you do these time trials in between, and then it's a kind of a race back then to Lillishall on the bike. And look, I was, naturally I felt good. I gave him a bit of a beating, and you feel good about yourself. But look, I was me, and he was him, and that was the way it was. I didn't think he was anything more special than I was.
And was that at a stage where he'd gone to Blackburn Rovers, the big fee, a record British fee, and everyone was talking about him, or was it beforehand when he was still with Southampton?
Well, no, he was. I think it was at the stage where he was going to Blackburn, yeah, and he was a very prominent and dominant player, and there was a lot of the top clubs talking about him as well. So I remember him saying to me that he had numerous offers, and he just needed to get this cruciate right. He had just torn the cruciate a little bit. He had no operation on it, and whereas I had the operation, I was probably 5 months down the line from the operation, and we were at different stages, but we were put into the same group because we felt, the physios felt that we'd be capable of doing the same amount of work on our knees at that particular time. So, we often went for walks after training. We went down to Lillishall. There'd be games going on there. There'd be soccer games where the academies would be coming in and playing soccer matches on the all-weather pitches. We'd be looking at rugby matches, the rugby league matches there would be on as well, and there we'd be watching those. And it was good few evenings there. I spent with him and kind of walking about and stuff like that. And I suppose you get the mindset of the way he's thinking about himself and the game and how committed he was. But he was a very, very committed guy, and very determined to get the best out of himself.
And when I was going through your book, it just seemed like the amount of effort you put into the hill running, whether it's in Van Cortlandt Park in New York, whether it's in down in Cork, whether it's up in Kildare, that was fairly extreme levels. And the same with the free taking. And again, just another quote to finish off that quote that Liam Hayes gave me, and he goes, "But Larry was mental. He was absolutely determined to be the best footballer in the country." Can you explain your mindset and what Liam says there? Do you feel that you did it to a mental level?
I didn't feel it was mental, even though my mother said to me on nights I was coming back late from working in the gym or running. She thought I was a lunatic. There was saying fellas locked up. So that was a kind of. But look, I didn't feel. Look, I wanted to just push myself and get the best out of myself, and that's the most important thing. I think that's. I would have been very disappointed, if I went through my career and didn't kind of get to the levels where I thought I should have been at. Whether that was winning All Ireland or being the best player in the field, so be it. If it wasn't, and I had prepared hard and it didn't happen, so be it. But at least I'd be happy in my mind that I was determined to really, force myself and get myself to the level of training, and getting your body at a pitch of really being, no excuses. And at that time there was no education in relation to training or how to train or how to go about it. I used to read, again, you're talking about books, I used to read little snippets of sports books about people training. And I remember one day in Dublin, I went down to Easton's and I picked up a little quote that Muhammad Ali said. And he said at the time he was fighting Joe Frazier. And Joe Frazier was commenting on the training sessions he was doing in the morning, that he'd have so much done before 8 o'clock. So he used to get up at 5:30. So Muhammad then said, look, I need to get up at 4:30 because, mentally, just that psychology in his head, knowing that he was going to be up before Frazier, he felt he had an advantage over him then. So, a lot of it can be in the head, in relation to how you prepare and how you go along with it. And I do think that, I suppose, I didn't want to leave any stone unturned. And I loved the preparation I done. I loved the gym work. I loved the hill running. I loved the long distance running in Punchestown Racecourse and Naas Racecourse where I went. And Dermot Earley was a great, he was a great asset to me in relation to the way of training. and he got two great lads from the army that were after taking over a gym in Meath. And at that time, you're talking about the late 70s, maybe 1980, late 70s, I said, 78, 79, where there wasn't many gyms around in the country at that time. And I was lucky that I came across these lads, and they really helped me along, really showed me how to be able to get to the level of strength and physicality in relation to doing the weight training. So that was an enormous help to me.
And is it more the buzz after you do a really tough slogging session that you enjoy that? I mean, nobody necessarily enjoys the pain as they're pushing themselves through the next run, the next hill run, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think, you know what, it was like what I said about Muhammad Ali. Psychologically, when you're in the dressing room and you're preparing for a big game, you're looking around and you're looking at the opposition, and you're going out in the field and you're saying in your head, there's nobody has trained harder than me. There's nobody has done what I've done. And even though you feel that you have enough ability or whatever, but I just think psychologically you needed to have that in your head really to have that advantage. And you're competing again, real tough and hard players. And, I suppose the era that I grew up in, like you had the likes of Offaly, Dublin, Meath were there. Leinster football was very, very strong. So physically you had to be very, very strong. And I needed to just get stronger. Like I was a weak little kid growing up and maybe a bit slim, but I think after a couple of years then I was a different kind of player,
Yeah, and again I asked Liam Hayes about that Meath and Cork rivalry, and where did it come about? And he said I think he said both teams wanted to, or sorry, he said why we went to war so fast and violently, I'll never fully understand it. I never fully understood at the time. Both teams wanted to win. We looked at trying to beat Dublin for 20 years. They looked at beating Kerry for forever. And when both teams get there, we said, this is a 1 in a million chance and we have to do it. I think that was the reason. Both teams were desperate. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, a lot of it, I'd say, is to do with it, yeah. Like Cork were being hammered by Kerry for forever. And I watched a lot of those games before I emigrated to America when Dublin were playing Meath, and Dublin used to mangle them physically. So I suppose both seeing a massive opportunity like that we could win All Irelands. I would have felt too like that maybe myself and Shea maybe added a little fuel to the fire as regards playing with Kildare. Kildare and Meath just have ferocious battles like. And we were the prominent players maybe on the Kildare team, and then all of a sudden then we're in Cork, and it probably added more fuel to the fire. And I think the tension was always there maybe that and 87 you'd say that was Meath were the better team, they won convincingly at the end, even though we started well in that game. But I think the rivalry then really started because I think people then grew into the fact like that we had two giants of the game coming head on. It was like two bulldozers coming together, and something was going to give. And they had the upper hand on us early, and then thanks be to God we got the upper hand on them later.
And do you have a particularly favourite moment on the field throughout your entire career, club or county?
I think with club, the defining moment of winning the first ever county with Castlehaven in '89. Again, the Bars in the county final, that was a real defining moment because it was what I came back for. It was what I wanted to do. To grow into the Castlehaven community and to see what it meant to them. Then to have the opportunity of leading that team out onto the field and winning the county final. And, I said it in my book, and I'm brutally honest in relation to my book. The night before that county final, I happened to be down in the showgrounds just close to Park Kiev, and I was at an event there, and I walked around and it was lashing rain, and I got down on my knees and I prayed to Almighty God that I'd have the best game of my life tomorrow, the county final. And look, I always believe in fate, and I think it was one of the best games I ever played in my life in that county final. And that was a really fitting moment. And of course, representing Cork then and wearing the jersey, 88 was I suppose one of my great days as regards the first day, even playing with a hamstring. It was probably one of my best games ever in Croke Park. And of course 1990 then of being the captain, and when that final whistle went, and just the emotions of everything like this, we realised that eventually we had achieved what we really had to do. Because even though we won the All-Ireland final the year before in '89, I doubt if too many people would look at that All-Ireland medal now if we didn't beat Meath, so it'd be diminished a bit. And that'd be no disrespect to Mayo, they were a hell of a team, but I do think when you have two giants of football coming together and you haven't beaten them in a major match, we needed to prove ourselves. We needed to stand up and to be counted. And I think that Cork team in 1990 was really, really focused to doing that. Mm-hmm. And that was a real defining moment.
I'm trying to think, I'm after forgetting, which year was it that you went out on holidays and you ended up coming across Meath, who were in the same place at the time when, you'd been at each other's throats, but you decided if you ran into them, you were going to talk to them?
Yeah, I think that was probably early 89. I think that was start of 89, January, I'd say. And, teams that time didn't have the luxury of going to New Zealand or Australia or wherever it was. It was kind of Canaries, that was the pitch, and you had a time period maybe in January to do it because you had national leagues before Christmas, you had them after Christmas starting in February, so the only little bit of a leeway was in January. So both teams had booked their holidays, and happened that both teams had booked kind of the same complex in the Canaries, which was amazing. And I had been in America. I had gone back after the All-Ireland final in '88, and I was joining the Cork team on the holiday in '89 in the Canaries. So I had heard that Billy had kind of given an ultimatum to the players that by no means to talk to these fellas when we were outside. So, but look, I informed Billy when I met him that I wasn't going to go behind his back. Yeah, okay there.
Yeah, stay going, yeah.
I informed Billy, look, I said, I'm good friends with these guys in Meath. I said I've been playing against them since I was 16 years of age. A lot of great friends there, Mick Lyons, Liam Hayes, McEntee, Castles. I go through every one of them, most of them anyway. And that I grew up with these guys. I played Raven Cup with them. I had won Raven Cup medals with them. And I said I wasn't going to not talk to them. So Billy said fine, you know what I mean? He didn't make any great deal about it. So look, I'd say I probably was the only person talking to them as far as I could gather. But look, what happens on the field stays in the field, and if you're not tough and hard enough to be able to deal with it on the field, then there's no point in trying to bring it outside of that. Then, you know what I mean? That was always my way, and whatever happens on the field stays in the field.
We just passed the 30-year anniversary of the double, obviously Cork winning the hurling and the football All-Ireland. How much pressure did you feel coming into that final to seal the deal and give the Rebels what they wanted?
Look, it wasn't the double didn't really come into it because the fact that I suppose the confrontation with Meath and Cork was huge, and probably even what even highlighted it more, if it wasn't really there already from 88 or 87, 88, 89, those years, is that the 1990 league semi-final, we played Meath in Croke Park on an Easter Sunday, and that ended up a real battle and a real nasty affair. There was fighting numerous times during the course of the game. There was fighting going in at half-time. There was fighting after the game. The supporters were even waiting for us outside the dressing room, the Meath supporters. And Meath beat us that day by 3 points. And there was an incident happened in the dressing room, and well talked about. When Billy just flung himself down on his knees and just prayed to Almighty God that them buggers next door would be in the All-Ireland final, and that we wanted to really, we needed to really get them and beat them. And so I don't think in any way like that with the hurlers winning 2 weeks before that put any pressure on the Cork football team at all. I just think that the focus of every Cork player was there for a long time to really get Meath in an All-Ireland final and to just really, beat them. And it was amazing because I went up in the train on the previous day. We all went up in the train on the previous day, and I was sitting beside Colin O'Neill, and Colin O'Neill was playing full forward on Mick Lyons, and Colin would be a very good friend of mine, and Colin didn't speak a word to me on the way up, and I said to myself, he had two ways of playing, he was either switched on or switched off, but if he was switched on, there was no player in the country could mark him. but he was just psyching himself up so much in his head for Mick Lyons. And, unfortunately, he was having the game of his life until he got sent off. And even in the dressing room at half time, players hardly sat down on the bench. They were all standing. They didn't even know, I'd say, we had a player sent off. And they were just waiting to get out and finish the job. So the focus was incredible. And I think for the Cork team and everybody involved in that era, I think it was so important that we got over the line that day.
And are there some players on that Meath team where you still wouldn't be able to look them in the eye because of the ferocity of the rivalry? Because you've definitely talked about how a lot of you now are friends, and Liam Hayes has spoken about this too.
I think that has mellowed. I suppose you can only talk, I suppose, personally for yourself in relation to the impact of those games. I'd be coming from a totally different angle in relation to the Meath team. I've always said that the Meath team was a hell of a team. One of the best teams you'd ever see. Equally, the Cork team was equally as good, if not better. I think you had two teams coming together. If one team didn't arrive at that time, I think that team could have won 4 or 5 All-Irelands, whichever. I don't think there's any. I think the greatest, I suppose, malice or respect that both teams had for each other was when John Kearns at Lord Mercer died. That we had a hell of a representation from Meath players to come down for that funeral, and I think that really buried any hatchet that was there. And I think that the respect that a lot of those players have now for each other is of the utmost, highest quality. And also, I do believe that when you beat somebody a team that you know that is the best out there, and it was Cork and Meath, I think that All-Ireland final, that All-Ireland medal means an awful lot more. And you could win 4 or 5 beaten teams maybe that you don't have the same intense rivalry with. But I do think if you beat the team that's really of high quality and no one like that, they're a serious team, I do think that All-Ireland medal is special then. And I think both teams realise that now at the end of the day. And I think the respect for that a lot of players have for each other is really great.
So you won many Munster titles, 6, I think, a couple of All-Irelands, a league and All-Stars as well. Once you eventually retired, did you find it hard to pull yourself away from playing given the levels of dedication you had while you were playing?
Yeah, without doubt. The players, when you're playing, you're in the thick of things. You feel like that you can make things happen. That was no longer there then when I retired. When I took over as manager, a lot of times, or most of the time, all of the time, that you're just you don't have that power. You don't have the power to be able to change things that you would like to be able to do when you were as a player. It's a massive feeling, to be over a team, to be managing the team. It's the next best thing, to be trying to get a group of players together that's so committed and to see a team then develop and to get to a stage where they're on the big stage and they're successful. When I was manager, we had magic moments. We had suffering defeats, but we had magic moments. We came very close to winning the All-Ireland in '99, which again would have been equivalent to winning the double again, because the hurlers had won 2 weeks before that. Is it the same? No. A player is what you want to be. To kind of fall out with it, or not fall out with it, but to retire and not to be able to do it again, of course, it's gut wrenching, and you just feel like that. Your body and soul is gone. Of course, I get a great satisfaction looking at games now and see my own club playing and watching Cork playing and even Kildare playing, or any of the counties that I've been involved with. To go and watch my young fella play. Of course, they're great moments and they're great kicks, but you will never get the enjoyment that you have when you're out there between the white lines and it's really in the heat of battle. They're the greatest moments of your life.
And your last ever game, do you remember walking off the field? Had you already the decision made that this was your last outing?
I thought in 1996 it was my last outing, but it's amazing what changes. I had two major surgeries on my back. I had a disc taken out. I thought that was it. I thought I'd never even played club football again. And then I came back in '97 and started playing. come back late in that year and started playing then late on then with Castlehaven through the championship. I came on a sub in the quarter final against Mallow, I think, and I suppose it just started. My recovery then, my back injury started to get better, and I felt good again. And then I was really starting to play well again, and I suppose there was increasing pressure then when that year went on, and I had done so well with Castlehaven in the county, and then we were representing Cork then in the Munster Championship, and probably had one of my games of my life in the Munster final against Fethard. So increasing pressure came like that. Probably one of the best forwards in the county is manager, and he should be playing. So I brought on Conor Coonan as my assistant, and Conor, I suppose, with his experience, kind of said, "Look," he said, "you should give it a go." And it was something I didn't want to do maybe at the time, but then when I was given the opportunity, and I said, "Look, I knew this was going to be my last swan song wearing the county jersey, and I was never a one to back off of any challenges. So, look," I said, I take it head on and see how it went. But I wanted to know. I didn't want any kind of any. I wanted to be fair with the other players. I wanted to be the same as any of the other players. If I wasn't good enough, so be it. I didn't start, or if I wasn't playing well, I came off. But that was my last game in Kerry in the Munster semi-final. Munster semi-final in '98. Even though I was manager as well the same day. Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely must have been an unusual one, to say the least. You've been very good with your time, Larry. Really appreciate it. We'll probably still only scratch the surface with the stuff that's in Believe, your great book. So people definitely get out and get that and have a read through that. So Larry, really appreciate you joining me, and hopefully we'll chat again.
Yeah, thanks very much, Shane. And look, appreciate everything the support I've got over the years, and magnificent here in Cork. I've been so lucky, to have Captain Castlehaven, Captain Cork, and look, just want to thank everybody for the support always in true business and everything. And look, I hope you enjoyed the book. It's an honest read, and please God, it'll get you through this trying times that we're having at the moment, and it'll nip away at a few weeks or whatever. And just thank everybody again, and thanks very much, Shane, for having me on.
Appreciate it.